Good afternoon, everybody, or
Hey.
I'm Amelia,
I'm Tom.
and we're coming to you from Dayton, Ohio, home of the Wright brothers and Paul Lawrence Dunbar, and the ancestral home of the Shawnee and Miami peoples. So there you have it. And we have a story from the Gospel of Luke. We're still in chapter 17. So Tom's going to tell us the story.
And we're on our way up to Jerusalem. So this is the getting toward the climax of the travel journey. So on the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going through the region between Samaria and Galilee. And as he entered a village, 10 lepers came near to him. Keeping their distance, they cried out to him, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." And Jesus said to them, when he saw them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were made clean. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back and, praising God with a loud voice, he fell on his face at Jesus' feet and thanked him. Now, he was a Samaritan. And Jesus asked, "Weren't 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Was none of them found to return and give thanks to God except this foreigner?" And he said to him, "Get up and go your way. Your faith has saved you."
All right. Thanks, Tom. Okay, we're going to talk some about what's been named as biblical performance criticism, which just is a relatively new approach to interpreting and understanding the Bible, biblical passages. So, Tom, why don't you just give us a very brief description of what biblical storytelling criticism is?
Biblical performance criticism is the study of the Bible as sound, as traditions, compositions that were performed for audiences. The general assumption that has driven historical critical study of the Bible has been that there were readers of texts. And so that metaphor of silent reading has been the dominant framework. Performance criticism says that was a later development. The biblical compositions were compositions of sound that were performed either from memory or from a text for audiences. So it's a major reorientation of the understanding of what the Bible was and of methodology. An example is that traditional historical criticism has been like scholars who would study compositions of Bach, say, or Mozart, and would look at those texts and analyze them, but never hear the music, never play it. So this is a basic reorientation of biblical scholarship.
Okay, thanks. Now, applying sort of different aspects of biblical performance criticism to this story, you'd sort of look at three aspects. So one is the storyteller, or the teller. In this case, it was Tom. One is, the story, and then also the audience. Okay, so in terms of the telling of the story, when you told it, some of the things we pay attention to are, for example, volume. So in this story, you have sort of a contrast between the beginning of the story and then when Jesus is talking to the 10 lepers, and then later on when he's just talking to the one who came back. So you were really loud in that first part. So why would you be loud?
It says so. It says that they called out to him and that Jesus responded. And later it's very explicit that the Samaritan came back praising God with a loud voice. So there's even an explicit description of the volume of the Samaritan's praise that also reflects what happened at the beginning of the story.
Yeah, so part of it is that it says they're at a distance, so in order to be heard, he's got to call out loudly, and then it actually gives you like stage directions. So, and what we're talking about, even if you are not going to learn it by heart to tell, which of course we promote and advise, but even if you're reading it, it's important to pay attention to these aspects of the story. Okay, and so there's volume.
Just a word about memory.
Yeah.
Even with the texts of Greek and Hebrew, in order to read them, you had to have basically memorized them. It's like, compositions for the piano or the organ that are very rapid and so on. You have to memorize those moves and so on. You can't look at all those notes as you're playing. Same was true of the biblical manuscripts.
Okay, then in another aspect besides volume, loud and soft, is tempo. So when you work with these stories, you first of all take them out of the paragraph form that they're in the Bible, and you create a sound map. And by the way, on our website, which is gotell.org, there's a story page for every gospel lection, and you can find a sound map there as well as Tom's commentary. But anyway, so part of that is it helps you see visually a short phrase or short sentence, and that usually translates into slowing down the tempo. So things that, like phrases that are long, go fast, and then if it's a short phrase or short sentence, it goes slowly. And you have that a couple times in this story. So one is, let's see, they were made clean. As they went, they were made clean. So that's kind of
the shortest one is he was a Samaritan.
Yeah, right. That's the shortest one. So that would be, and I guess slowing down gives it more emphasis, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Then also when he was made clean, you kind of like put your hands up. So that would be a gesture. It's another thing we pay attention to in biblical performance criticism, is what kind of gestures there might be. And so why were you looking at your hands, or what was going on there?
Well, that was what was kind of a symbol of being made clean, was that, with leprosy, frequently it would affect and be visible on your hands. And so there was the experience of being unclean, was of having hands that were distorted, that were diseased. And so a symptom of being cleansed from leprosy was that your hands would be clean. So that was one of the great joys, was to be able to look at your hands and that they were, they were normal. They were, pink, rather than being diseased.
Yeah. And so there's volume, tempo, gestures, and then there's also tone of voice. When you said that line, now he was a Samaritan, you put some significant, what I would call, judgment in that tone.
Right. Prejudice.
So what's that about? Why would
Yes.
you have that tone of voice when you said that line?
Well, he says that he was a foreigner, and the attitudes of people in the time of Jesus were Judeans, was that Samaritans were their enemy, and so they lived close together. Samaria was divided, was in the middle of Judea on the south and Galilee on the north. But it was there was a lot of hostility that existed between these two, effectively, countries, Samaria and Galilee, Samaria and Judea. So Jesus going through that area was, entering into and walking through enemy territory. And so in this case, the man who was healed was one of those Samaritans.
Okay, great. Yeah, right. We're going to come back to that, but I want to do one more aspect about focusing on the storyteller before we move on to the audience. At the end, you have suggested in your written commentary, and I think you did it here when you told it, although it's harder because we're doing this on Zoom and it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to remember to look up at the camera when you're, that's where your audience is. But anyway, at the end, you suggested that, let's see, it's the line, where are the other 9? That at that point, you as the teller of the story would look at the audience.
Right.
So now we're getting into eye contact. It's one of the things that really makes storytelling different than reading or acting, is that you actually address directly at times the audience.
Right.
And why would you propose that at that point in the story at the end there?
Well, it's simply an assumed direction that goes with performance for audiences in storytelling. It's not on a stage. It's not, that people are looking on actors, so on. This is a storyteller who is addressing the audience, and so it involves audience address. And
yeah, but I meant at this specific point in the story when you're suggesting that we look at the audience when we say, let's see, where are the other 9?
yes.
Why would it be? I mean, of course, Jesus isn't at that point. He might be talking to the Samaritan who was the leper, but you're saying kind of turn and address the audience at that point.
Right. And that's because those who Jesus is addressing there, the question that he's asking and so on, weren't there 10? Where are the other 9? He's not talking to the Samaritan. He's talking to people who were watching. Maybe the disciples are in the background, but who is addressed is directly to the audience, and that's especially the case with now the man was a Samaritan, so that's addressed directly to the audience. Right,
because you're right, but I guess I thought that was a powerful idea there at the end, and I think it's partly because if you look at people and say that line about, it would get you as an audience, as a person listening to the story, to think about the importance of being thankful, as well as including even those we think who are enemies, into the family of God, so to speak.
Right. Yep.
Okay, so the audience, who's the audience? And how can we sort of understand, or what would be the implication that this audience might be a certain group?
Well, the implication is that it's those who were not Samaritans, that is Judeans,
Mhm.
people who lived in Judea and Galilee, who are often addressed as Jews. So this is clearly Jesus addressing that community.
Because
And
they're the ones who
the
would
story-
consider a Samaritan a foreigner, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay. And so
Right.
what would they, like, what, as they
And I'll
heard,
just, and the word for that in Greek is allogenes. Allo means other, genes means other genes, other biological identity. So the the Samaritans were descendants of the
well, wait a
the
minute, the word for what
northern
is that? The word for what is allogenes? I'm not sure what, if people will catch.
foreigner.
Foreigner, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So it's another, it's an other. So
And where else is that used? They would know that that word was used in a significant place. Like,
well,
at the
this
temple.
is actually the only use of that word in the New Testament.
Oh, okay,
So Luke often uses distinctive words, and this is one of them.
okay.
So, but what it refers to is that the divisions between the kingdom, the northern kingdom, which was conquered by the Assyrians, and then the Assyrian policy was to intermarry with conquered countries. And so there was a lot of intermarriage that had gone on. The conquest was in 722. And so it had been, hundreds of years that they had been separate countries.
All right, but you told me
Separate
that that word was
nations.
you said that word was used on a sign or something that they found at the
Yes,
temple
right.
that helps us understand what the big deal was about foreigners.
Right. The sign was on the post leading from the court of the Gentiles, which was the major part of the temple, into the court of the women. And the saying written on the sign was, any foreigner who enters here is guilty of his own death.
Oh, and
So,
that's the same word there that you were
yes,
mentioning, same word as
yes.
used in the story. Okay.
That
So
was the degree of alienation from the foreigners. They were prohibited at the price of death from entering into the inner part of the temple.
okay. What else was I gonna ask? Let's see. Oh, so if the audience are largely Judeans listening to the story, for whom Samaritans would be foreigners, what might people be thinking of when they heard the story Jesus told? What in their own, tradition would they be remembering?
Well, the most explicit is the story of Elisha, healing Naaman, the general of the Syrian army. When he came and asked for healing, Elisha said, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times." And he refused to go. But his servant said, why not? You could, you got nothing to lose. So he did, and he was cleansed of his leprosy. So it was the same thing of the extension of cleanliness, purification to a foreigner, to an enemy. And Naaman was the general of the Syrian army. So he was
Yeah, he was really an enemy.
He was really
Yeah.
an enemy.
Serious enemy. Yeah. And that's the same story that got Jesus in so much trouble when he preached in Nazareth too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
he cited that.
Yeah. Right. At the end, you said get up and go. Your faith has saved you. I know my NRSV, I think, says your faith has
Made you well.
made you well. So it's kind of more like a healing story. Did you check that out? Is
I
it
did.
actually?
And the word is sozo in Greek, which means to save and or to redeem, but it basically means to save. So in this case, to be saved from the affliction of this horrible disease of leprosy. And so made well is okay as a translation, but it's not as explicit as has saved you. You've been saved from a terrible disease.
Okay. And then finally, sort of in terms of the story, I mean, what are the dynamics of story, or as we listen to it today, what do we bring? I mean, people will hear different things, but what do you think was maybe the intent of Luke in including this story about Jesus? What was he calling listeners to pay attention to?
At the core of this story is the extension of the benefits of the kingdom of God to those who are on the other side, to those who are the other. So there's a progression in Luke Acts of the extension of the blessings of the kingdom of God to Judeans, the paralytic, the woman who had a hemorrhage. So there are several stories about Judeans being healed, saved in various ways, fed. Then there are stories about Samaritans, which was the next degree of alienation, difference. But then the next is Gentiles, who were explicitly the enemies, especially in the aftermath of the Jewish-Roman War. So this is part of the progression of the extension of the blessings of the kingdom of God from Judeans to Gentiles.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Tom. I think I just might mention, since we're talking so much about biblical performance criticism, highlighting that sort of this time. When I send out the e-letter that has a link to this video, I'll include a link both to your commentary, Tom, and also there's a biblical performance criticism website, so I'll include a link to that also. And if you want to receive these emails, just send me an email, and that would be amelia@gotell.org, and I'll include you on our, we call it Monday with Jesus because we send the emails out on Monday morning, the Monday before the Sunday when it's going to be the lectionary gospel. So, anything else you want to say, Tom?
The development of performance criticism is a major development in biblical scholarship. And so, and in the commentary, I'm able to go into more detail and so on then in these that we have to keep short commentaries that we've done orally on the videos.
Yeah, well, I have a feeling we weren't so short today, but that's okay.
We were very short.
People can always feel free to turn it off. All right. Okay. All right. Bye, everybody. Have a really good week.
Yep. Blessings.
And be thankful.
Yes.
Oh, I was something I was going to mention. I have spiritual direction this past week, and it was a new director, and she suggested that I every day write down, one time that I felt God's presence, and one thing I'm thankful about. So that seemed like excellent advice for spiritual growth. So I'm going to do that little discipline. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.